It feels good to see the ball go through the net. But I think, every game, regardless, you're making shots, you're not, it feels really, really good to have your teammates behind you.
The basketball world was shaken to its core when Lexie Hull dropped a revelation that flipped everything we thought we knew about Caitlin Clark upside down. No one saw it coming. In one unexpected moment, Hull revealed shocking details that painted a completely new picture of Clark's true personality, her journey, and what's really happening behind the scenes with the Indiana Fever. Fans were stunned. Teammates whispered in disbelief, and social media descended into chaos. What truth did Lexie reveal, and why is it changing Caitlin's image forever? Before the doubts, before the struggle to keep her career alive, Lexie Hull was a name that carried weight. She had been a warrior at Stanford, fierce and determined, a champion who played with the kind of confidence that electrified arenas. When the Indiana Fever selected her as the 6th overall pick in the WNBA draft, it wasn't just about talent, it was about belief. They saw in her a player with intelligence, precision, and the heart of a leader who could help rebuild a broken team. But the professional league was an entirely different battlefield. The speed, the power, the pressure, it wasn't just physical, it was mental. Suddenly, Hull found herself spending more time on the bench than she ever had before. Game after game, her minutes slipped away, and with them, her confidence. The cheers she once inspired now echoed faintly in her memory. "It messes with your head," she admitted later, describing the pain of going from an essential piece of a winning team to just another name on the roster. She wasn't alone. Every player in the league had once been the star of her college team. Now they were all fighting to matter again, to stand out again, to be seen again. But Hull's struggle wasn't just her own. It was part of something much deeper, something that had been simmering inside the Indiana Fever long before she arrived. The team wasn't just losing games. They were losing faith. Years of defeat had turned their locker room heavy, a place filled with quiet resignation. Losing had become normal. Criticism replaced encouragement. Hope was thinning with every season. The Fever weren't missing shots, they were missing purpose. And then everything changed. Caitlin Clark entered the picture. Her arrival wasn't ordinary, it was an earthquake. She brought with her a force that pulled attention from every direction. Cameras followed her, fans packed arenas, and the expectations skyrocketed overnight. But for Clark, this wasn't about fame or the spotlight. It was personal. The same burning fire that had made her a legend at Iowa now burned through the walls of the Fever's locker room. She didn't come to fit into their system, she came to rebuild it. Her standard of excellence didn't just challenge the team's losing mentality, it declared war on it. From her first practices, the difference was electric. The pace picked up. Conversations grew louder. Accountability returned. Even Hull noticed it, not just in Clark's game, but in her presence. Caitlin carried herself with a composure that demanded respect. "It's really awesome to get to know her," Hull later said, recognizing that behind the fame, Clark was grounded, intelligent, and far more mature than anyone expected. Yet that calmness came with an edge, an intensity that demanded everyone match her energy. The turning point came during an early practice session. After a series of careless turnovers, frustration erupted. Clark, sharp and fiery, stopped the drill cold. What followed wasn't a pep talk. It was a verbal storm. She called out mistakes, named players directly, and her tone was raw and direct. The gym fell silent. This wasn't the smiling rookie the media loved. This was the competitor forged in fire. Her words cut through the air, exposing the cracks in a team that had long been afraid to confront itself. The coaches faced a dilemma. Should they rein her in or let her burn? She was their prized rookie, their beacon of hope. Her intensity could be powerful, but dangerous. There were whispers about asking her to tone it down, to ease the tension. But deep down, everyone knew what was happening wasn't destruction. It was rebirth. They made the risky choice to let her fire burn freely. No censorship. No softening. Just a gamble that her drive might awaken something long dormant inside the team. And it did. While some players recoiled from Clark's demanding style, Lexie Hull saw something entirely different. For her, this wasn't intimidation, it was an invitation. In that moment, she understood this might be her last chance to rise. She could either shrink or fight back. She chose to fight. Hull began staying late after practices, running extra drills, shooting until her arms ached, fighting against the quiet doubts that had been holding her captive. And when Caitlin stayed late too, Hull stayed with her. They matched each other's energy, two different flames burning toward the same purpose. Soon something began to shift. The spark that had gone missing from Hull's game returned, reigniting the confidence she thought she'd lost forever. Their connection grew naturally. Clark's impossible passes met Hull's relentless hustle in perfect rhythm. Clark would thread the ball through a crowd, and somehow Hull would be there, ready, balanced, finishing at the rim. What began as tension evolved into chemistry. Coaches and teammates started noticing how electric their dynamic was. Their bond wasn't born from comfort, it was forged through challenge, frustration, and sweat. Caitlin changed everything, Hull said later, and she meant it. Clark's influence wasn't just about points or stats, it was about energy, about belief, about a contagious determination that demanded everyone around her rise to their best. Hull's comeback became symbolic, proof that anyone could rebuild themselves. And slowly that energy spread across the team. Aaliyah Boston set harder screens, knowing Clark would reward her effort. Kelsey Mitchell sprinted the court with renewed hunger, trusting Clark's eyes would always find her. Even the bench players started fighting harder in practice, feeding off the pulse that Clark had unleashed. The Fever's offense transformed, no longer predictable, no longer timid. They played with urgency, passion, and a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. But greatness always comes at a cost. As the Fever started winning, so did the pressure. The spotlight that had once felt distant now burned hotter than ever. Hull, who had once faded quietly in the background, found herself under scrutiny. Every missed shot, every small mistake, every defensive lapse magnified. The online noise was loud, cruel even, dissecting her every move. But she didn't break. She learned to turn that pressure into power. "Keeping up with Caitlin isn't easy," she said in a rare interview. "It changes your life." Her words carried weight. Her days became longer, her nights shorter. Early mornings in the gym, late nights studying film. Every day was a battle between exhaustion and purpose. She realized something most fans never see. Greatness isn't glamorous. It's lonely. It demands sacrifices few are willing to make. But through that grind, something inside her hardened, a resilience that couldn't be shaken. She was no longer chasing perfection for approval. She was chasing it for herself. Yet with success came jealousy. Across the league, rivals began to resent the Fever's rise. What began as admiration for Clark's talent turned into hostility. Opponents delivered hard fouls, threw cheap shots, trying to break her spirit. But the Fever weren't backing down. Hull had become one of the emotional anchors of the team. When Clark was hit hard in a heated matchup, Hull didn't hesitate. She stormed forward, standing face to face with the aggressor, her voice sharp and fearless. The benches nearly cleared. The message was clear. An attack on Caitlin was an attack on all of them. That moment became a turning point. The Fever were no longer a struggling team searching for identity. They were united, battle-tested, fiercely protective of each other. Through Clark's unrelenting drive and Hull's reborn confidence, the team rediscovered something deeper than victory. They found loyalty, pride, and an unbreakable bond. Caitlin's leadership wasn't loud, it was lived. Her glare after a mistake, her precision under pressure, her silent demand for excellence, those were her speeches. She didn't create followers. She created warriors. And for Lexie Hull, it wasn't just a comeback, it was a rebirth. The same grit that once defined her at Stanford had returned, sharper, harder, unstoppable. She wasn't just surviving in the league anymore. She was thriving. Yet this was only the beginning. Because what came next would test not just their skills, but their trust, the bond they built under fire, and whether it could survive when fame threatened to tear it apart. When fame collides with pressure, even the strongest teams can crack. Caitlin Clark's arrival didn't just change the Indiana Fever, it rewrote their entire identity. A franchise once forgotten suddenly became the heartbeat of women's basketball. Tickets sold out within hours, arenas overflowed, and cameras followed their every move. Every look, every tweet, every post-game reaction became headline material. What should have been a dream season quickly turned into an emotional roller coaster. The attention was intoxicating but exhausting. For some, it was fuel. For others, it was fire. Yet somehow, amid the noise, Lexie Hull began to see something extraordinary forming, a kind of unity no one expected. From the first day Caitlin stepped into that locker room, you could feel it, Hull said later. Everything changed. The energy, the focus, the standard. What could have become a storm of jealousy and ego instead became a wave of shared purpose. Clark's presence didn't divide them, it forged them. Team dinners after late games, quiet conversations during flights, and hours of laughter in hotel hallways began to stitch them together. Caitlin wasn't treated like a superstar. She was treated like a sister. The veterans guided her through the chaos of fame, and the rookies drew inspiration from her work ethic without losing their own voices. That delicate balance turned into something rare in professional sports, a culture of mutual respect. And at the center of it was Lexie Hull, who had evolved from a quiet observer into a steady emotional anchor. She had learned how to speak through actions, not words. Every dive for a loose ball, every defensive stand, every pat on a teammate's back became her way of leading. Her chemistry with Caitlin deepened with every game. Hull began to anticipate Clark's movements, reading her body language like a second language. Caitlin's passes seemed magnetically drawn to her hands. Their connection was seamless, two completely different players moving with one rhythm. The Fever's offense became fluid, fast, and fearless. Commentators started calling it the Hull-Clark effect. But then came the moment that tested everything. During a crucial stretch, Caitlin Clark went down with an injury. The crowd went silent. The energy that had filled every arena seemed to vanish overnight. Without her, the Fever looked lost. The offense stumbled. The confidence faded. And for a brief, painful period, the whispers returned. Maybe they were nothing without her. But Lexie refused to let the team sink. We had to carry her fire inside us, she would later say. That was the only way forward. Hull stepped into the leadership void without hesitation. She was the first one in the gym every morning and the last one to leave. When spirits dropped, she pushed harder. When players looked defeated, she reminded them what they'd built together. Her message was simple. The Fever's identity wasn't just Caitlin Clark. It was all of them. Practices intensified. Communication sharpened. The team learned to function differently, to play faster, smarter, and more connected. Without their star, they rediscovered themselves. When Caitlin returned weeks later, she didn't come back to the same team. The Fever she rejoined were tougher, more balanced, more self-assured. The dependence that once existed had been replaced by trust. When Clark and Hull reunited on the court, the chemistry was even stronger than before. Their eye contact said everything, no words needed. What followed was some of the best basketball of their careers. Caitlin's creative playmaking met Lexie's unrelenting drive, and the result was a storm that the rest of the league couldn't contain. But success brings its own kind of burden. The brighter Clark's star burned, the harsher the spotlight became. Every move she made was dissected. Every game drew nationwide commentary. It wasn't just basketball anymore. It was entertainment, business, culture. And in that whirlwind, Hull faced a new kind of challenge, staying grounded in the shadow of a global phenomenon. It wasn't jealousy, it was survival. Living beside that level of fame tests even the strongest minds. But Hull handled it with grace. You don't compete with someone's light, she said quietly. You reflect it. Instead of retreating, she leaned closer. She became Caitlin's quiet ally, her emotional stabilizer amid the chaos. During interviews, Lexie stood by her side, answering with calm when the questions got too sharp. During tough games, she was the first to defend her. When opponents tried to rattle Clark with trash talk or hard fouls, Hull was there, steady, fearless, protective. Their relationship became the backbone of the team's resilience. Two contrasting energies, one loud, one quiet, working in harmony. One burned bright, the other kept the flame steady. Together, they found balance. The more they won, the more people noticed that this wasn't just Caitlin's team anymore. It was something bigger. Analysts began talking about the Fever's transformation, how a struggling franchise had turned into a symbol of unity and grit. Lexie Hull, once overlooked, was now being praised for her consistency, her leadership, her humility. She wasn't the loudest player, but she was the most reliable. the kind of athlete every great team needs but few truly value until the pressure hits. But even with success came the inevitable question: could they hold it all together when the stakes rose higher than ever? The playoffs loomed, and with them came the weight of expectation. The Fever were no longer the underdogs. Every opponent now came prepared to challenge them. Every mistake carried consequences. Yet this time they were ready. Clark didn't have to shoulder everything alone anymore, and Hull didn't have to prove she belonged. They had already earned that. Their confidence wasn't loud, it was solid. Before one of their biggest playoff games, a reporter asked Hull how she managed the pressure of playing beside someone as famous as Caitlin Clark. She smiled and said, "Scars remind you that you've survived. Every one of us has them. That's why we play like we do." That line became the Fever's unofficial motto, and it showed. On the court, they played with controlled chaos. Every possession fought for, every rebound contested, every player moving with shared purpose. Clark dazzled with her vision. Hull anchored the defense and inspired the hustle plays that changed momentum. Their teammates followed, not because they were told to, but because they believed. What was once Caitlin's story had become their story. A collective rise. The narrative shifted. Media outlets began writing about the new Fever culture, crediting not just Clark's brilliance, but the leadership of Hull and the bond they had built. Off the court, their friendship deepened. They often stayed after games, sitting quietly in the locker room, decompressing long after the cameras left. There was a mutual understanding between them. Fame fades, but character endures. Together, they'd redefined what leadership looked like in women's basketball. It wasn't about who scored the most, it was about who lifted the most. Their story wasn't about instant success, but relentless persistence. Injuries, criticism, exhaustion, they faced it all and kept going. And that, more than any stat line, became their legacy. Fans began seeing something deeper than highlights and headlines. They saw the cost of greatness, the lonely mornings, the silent battles, the unseen sacrifices. Lexie Hull embodied that quiet heroism. Caitlin Clark embodied the fiery pursuit of excellence. Together they turned those contrasts into power. As the Fever chased a playoff berth, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about resilience, about two women who refused to let pressure break them, about transforming pain into purpose, about turning teammates into family. When the final buzzer sounded on one of their most emotional victories, the crowd roared, chanting their names in unison. Clark lifted her hands, Hull smiled beside her, and for a brief moment, the noise of the world faded away. All that remained was the bond they had built, tested, strengthened, and unbreakable. Because in the end, the true victory wasn't in the score or the headlines. It was in the way they carried each other through the storm and emerged standing side by side. Their legacy wasn't written in points or trophies, it was written in endurance, trust, and loyalty. And as Hull later said in one final interview that went viral across the league, the real victory isn't on the scoreboard, it's in the soul.